Hi, Igor. Let's take a look at this new set of essays you've sent us. The first one is about average working time. Let's see what you said. Experts throughout both the developing and developed ED world have debated whether the number of working hours is proportional to the country's economic success. Nice sentence. Good. Some believe that overtime hours produce more results. Personally, I strongly disagree. Okay, I want a contrast here because you've got two opposing parts of the sentence here. So add a while here, or however, one or the other, but not both. So while some believe overtime hours produce more results, personally, I strongly disagree. This essay will discuss both sides using examples from the UK government and Oxford University to demonstrate points and prove arguments. Okay? Lovely so far. On one hand, some specialists argue that high company profit is a result of working extended hours by the employees. Okay, there was a cleaner way to say this. So high company profit is a result of extended working hours, or is a result of employees working extended hours. All right? The central reason behind this is that long journeys at work have as result more complex tasks accomplished. All right, I don't really understand that. What do you mean long journeys at work? That doesn't really make sense, and neither does have as result. That's awkward. So it should have been something else, like perhaps long days at work allow more tasks to be accomplished. Okay. For example, recent empirical research by the UK government demonstrated that employees doing extra hours at work can conclude, or how about can complete 10% more tasks than those who do not do extra hours. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that staying at work longer will generate more results for the company and consequently for the country. Okay, now you talked about company profit, but what you didn't really talk about until this very last sentence was how this affects the country. So I think you needed to skip some of this detail and talk more about what this means for the country. So why does the country benefit? You just mentioned it super briefly, but that's what the whole essay is supposed to be about. What effect does this have on the country? Well, you could have said that longer working hours equal more profits, and more profits equal more tax money paid to the government. Okay, and that the assumption is that the more hours worked, the more is produced, and this results in more profit. So that's what you need to be focused on, how the country benefits and how these countries are more economically successful. Maybe you could have shown an example of a country that has long working hours and is economically successful. So you did mention this about the country, but it was at the very, very end, and so it doesn't really feel like you've explored the topic the way it needs to be explored, okay? So let's take a look at your other paragraph. On the other hand, although there are some benefits of long working hours, the impact of reduced working hours cannot be underestimated with a D here. This is largely because highly, L-Y, effective results have been created more often by well-rested, we don't say rested, we say well-rested employees, those who have normal or reduced average working hours. For instance, an extensive study by Oxford University showed that by reducing 20% of working hours, reducing 20% of working hours increases the effectiveness by 10%. Thus, it's possible to state beyond doubt that not only should extended working hours be avoided, but they should be reduced. Again, there's not enough emphasis on the effect on the country here. I mean, everything you're writing is very good. It's cohesive, it's developed, and all of that is wonderful. But you're not talking about how the country benefits or how the country doesn't benefit. It's a little too focused on the worker and what this means for the worker, and much less so on the country, okay? Which is what the essay is really all about, okay? The country and the effect on it. So from the arguments and examples given, I firmly believe that countries with long average working hours are not more economically successful than those with normal average. But what does this mean with normal average? That doesn't make sense. With average working hours is what you mean. It is predicted that reduced working hours will increasingly be adhered by countries looking to be economically victorious. All right, the sentence was good. I didn't really care for victorious. We don't really say, oh, look at our economical victory or something. I mean, it's not really a collocation that's used when we talk about money. All right, victorious. It's a word we use in other contexts, so I didn't think it was really appropriate. All right, so this was good in a lot of ways. Like I said, I mean, you followed the template well. You did a lot of the things in terms of the structure and in terms of making it cohesive. I think this was a really strong element here. The coherence and cohesion portion of this essay were strong, and that's the thing that really stands out to me. Vocabulary was okay. Some of it was awkward. Of course, I had to correct some of it. The grammar was fine, but for me, like I said, you didn't put your focus on the right area. It was supposed to be on how this affects the countries, and you kind of mentioned the country as an afterthought. Okay, so make an effort to really pinpoint what the essay is asking you to talk about that and talk about just that. All right, so let's take a look here at this task 1. Don't forget to include the image in your answer. It's important for me to refer to it as necessary, so when you can do that, please do. Let's see what you wrote. The bar chart illustrates a comparison of the sales between brown and black leather shoes in 9 European countries, and you named them. That was good. In France, the number of sales of brown leather was slightly more than double the sales of black leather. Okay, get rid of the here. In UK, the black leather shoes had approximately 25% more sales than brown in leather in the analyzed year. The number of black leather sold in Germany and Ireland was the same, 70. The largest sales, well, it should be the greatest sales or largest sales. All right, go ahead. Let's stick with largest. That's fine. Of brown leather shoes happened in Poland with 130, followed by Hungary, Germany, and Italy with 125, 120, 105, respectively. The worst result of sales in 2018 was in Belgium with brown leather shoes. Get rid of the. A very small number of shoes were sold. All right, I wanted a where here. Where a very small number of 5 shoes were sold, while the number of black leather shoes sold was roughly 20 times more. In Poland, the sales of black leather were nearly half of the sales of brown leather, whereas in Hungary, both sales were broadly similar. Were here. Overall, the sales in 2018 of brown leather shoes were higher than the sales of black leather shoes in 5 of the analyzed 9 countries. The only 2 countries where the sales were higher than 100 pairs of shoes for both types were Italy and Hungary. Okay, so this is where I need the graph. Let me just find it and then we'll talk about this. All right, so here's the image of what you had to answer. And what you did was something that we call a mechanical answer. Now, what do I mean by mechanical? I mean that it's kind of machine-like and that it doesn't really analyze, or it doesn't really kind of make some critical decisions. Why do I say that? Because you started your answer, well, France had this, and then this, and UK had this, and then Germany had this, and Ireland had this, but that's not looking at this chart critically. Let me tell you what I mean. Now, first of all, I should say that there's no one universal way to do a task 1. However, there are some ways that do come out kind of cleaner and a little easier to read. What I want you to think about as your ultimate goal when you're writing a task 1 is that you want to be able to explain the information you have in front of you without too many details that kind of confuse the reader, but enough so that the reader can more or less imagine what you're looking at. Okay? And so sometimes that means you have to make some decisions. One of the decisions you have to make is rather than just going down the row and, talking about these countries like this, is to make some decisions about how you're going to organize your answer. And what we typically do in task 1 is we start with the highest number. Okay? So, that's one thing. And then another thing we also focus on is any of those numbers that really seem interesting to kind of point out. And then this one here, you've got 18 pieces of information, so you're going to have to do some grouping because you don't want to mention 18 pieces of information. That's just too much. So one of the ways I always recommend to do this is, okay, have your introduction, have your overview, and then have 2 detailed paragraphs, one talking about black leather, one talking about brown leather, and then use these numbers along the side. Another thing that I want to point out to you is that your number was inaccurate. Do you see this here? It means that the shoe sales are in thousands. So when we talk about 100, we actually mean 100,000 shoes. All right, and that's really important because if your numbers aren't accurate, it's really going to reduce your score for task achievement. So one of the ways I recommend doing this is starting with black leather shoes. Why? Because look, the sales for black leather shoes are actually, well, on average, it might not be the highest shoe sales. It's the highest figure in the chart. So that's a pretty decent place to start off. Okay? So again, you could have started off with brown leather shoes, but like I said, personally, I would have started off with black leather shoes, and I would have said this. Of the 9 countries, 3 had sales of black shoes over 100,000. They were Belgium, Hungary, and Italy. In fact, Hungary's sales at 140,000 were the highest were the highest shoes sold of any type in any country. Okay, then I would say the least black shoes sold were in France at 35,000 shoes. The remaining countries, and you had already named them in your introduction, so you don't have to name them again, all sold between 50 and 100,000 shoes. Okay, and you don't really care about a lot of these details, all right, because they're those middle numbers. You have a range of where they were, so you don't need to go into a ton of detail. And then in the next paragraph, I would do the same thing for brown leather shoes, except here you might want to emphasize the fact that 4 countries sold over 100,000. So here I would say, in contrast, 4 countries sold over 100,000 brown leather shoes. Specifically, they were Germany at this, Poland at this, Hungary at this, and Italy at this. Belgium sold the least number of brown leather shoes at approximately 5,000. This was the lowest figure of any country for any shoe color in the chart. And then again, you could do the same thing as we did before with the middle numbers. So that's one way of doing this that makes it really clean. Okay, and then the person reading this has a nice organized, structured way of looking at this chart. All right, so those are some of my suggestions, but again, it's not the only way to do this. There are other ways to do this as well, but it's a way that I think can help you kind of conceptualize how to organize these charts. All right, so why don't you revise these essays for us, return them to us, and send us another set. We'll be waiting. Good luck.